To you, the guys on duty, they having helped direct my actions through split-second divine timing, causing incidents to occur which have resulted in evidence of synchronicity in my life which could have never come about without their attention being paid to me. To you, Rita, a witness of this event, I am not, nor will I play the role of a Bible thumper, but I have been known to be a Bible stabber in the past. A number of times in the past I have demonstrated the power of the Bible and my Twilight Zone reality by stabbing a Bible and searching for the page and words at which the tip of the knife last penetrated a page. I would have whomever I was demonstrating to find that spot in the Bible by holding up the pages to the light, and let them decide as to which side of the page they wanted me to read from, front or back. These words always fit the circumstances surrounding us at that moment. One of the most incredible times was when Rita, a 52-year-old, homebound woman I was living with, found the spot and it read, "A hole and horses." I was quite taken by the fact that, the last page at which the knife blade made a hole, the words, "hole and horses" did appear. Not to mention the look on Rita's face as she pointed to the horses on the television, which I was unaware of. She was watching Bonanza. Just to let you know, the very last time I stabbed a Bible, which was many years ago, it read, "Stop raiding Israel." I could, at will, bring people into my reality if I wished to, as long as I was aware of evidence that I myself was ahead of the flow. I call it phasing, for lack of a better word. Okay, now, there is also the opportunity for phasing to warp into what I call tranactual. It's when the reflection of the previous event is realized, causing you to relate it to someone, as at that moment the previous two events lead to a third even more inexplicable. Fear of turning people off with my little signs from God and a few Bible passages is now non-existent in my world. Evidence that my world is not full of just what you might call coincidences cannot be denied. I let you decide for yourself. I will only state one last time, this is the God's honest truth of what has taken place in my life, in the so-called real world. While sitting at my typewriter, writing my story, there was an unusually great number of times I heard the word I was typing said on the television or radio. Sitting and listing the 3 songs I had listened to every day at lunch, on the jukebox at a Pizza Hut, in 1975, they were Radar Lover by Golden Earring, Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple, and Hypnotized by Fleetwood Mac. One by one, every one of these songs was played by the radio station I was listening to. While driving in my car, I looked at the clock. 10:33, translates in Earth code to amplify Jesus. I turned on the radio and heard the words, "Jesus is just all right with me." The Doobie Brothers were right on cue. Then there was the night that the Rolling Stones were playing at Joe Robbie Stadium, a few miles away from my balcony. A local rock radio station was playing the Bridges to Babylon album at the same time they were on stage. Between songs, the DJ stated that there had been gate crashers at the concert. It was time to go out on the balcony and have a smoke. I stepped to the railing and looked down. You're not going to believe me, but I saw a car crashed into the security gate just below. It gets even better, or should I say stranger. Later that night, while listening to another station playing a song from the Bridges to Babylon album, the song which sings about waking the fire chief, came on. I was staring at a car which had crashed into the median wall on the expressway below, and it was completely engulfed in flames. Occurrences were happening so frequently and so non-stop, goosebumps just weren't appearing. At times it did get so intense I would have to turn off the radio, because I did have to keep my feet on the ground and function in the real world. Countless and endless more incidents occurred, too numerous to relay as well as remember, but I would like to convey, they happened in a flow, moment after moment, hour after hour and day after day. There were a few particular events, which nearly caused me to drop to my knees though. I was driving back to work after lunch. Sitting at a stop sign, I looked left, then right, then left again and straight ahead. As I drove forward I heard screeching tires. I looked left to see a yellow Camaro, with its brakes locked up and sliding across the intersection in front of me, past my front end, and to my right it settled to a stop about 20 yards away. I sat there for several long moments and wondered if I was going to see backup lights and have a confrontation. He then drove off. I took a deep breath and considered that this idiot came flying around the corner to my left and did not consider someone or something might be around that corner. As he drove away, I drove slowly to the other side of the intersection and intentionally turned on the radio to see the reflection of this event, clearly with no doubt that there would be one. I heard screeching tires that went on, and on, and on, and then a crash. The announcer said, and I quote, "So you think you're a good driver? Take the safe driver test tonight with Ann Bishop, tonight at 6 on Channel 10. I turned off the radio and proceeded to drive back to work, realizing that every second of time it took till I turn on the radio was crucial. The flow was so intense on one particular day that I just could not take it anymore. It just didn't seem to satisfy me, and it held no answers as to why it was happening, and it always seemed to lead nowhere. I worked in a shop which always had at least 5 cars in it, and everyone working on them had their radios turned on. I was fit to be tied, so I turned off my radio and actually taped the trigger to my air drill on, so I could not hear anyone else's radio. Didn't work. From the far end of the shop I heard the words, "Since you've been gone, all that's left is a band of gold." I looked down at the ring finger on my left hand and my wedding band was not there. I trembled for an instant, jumped out of the car and ran over to the car a co-worker was backing out of the shop to have delivered to its owner. I opened the trunk and retrieved my ring. I had given him a hand earlier in the day, in order to run one of the drain tubes for the sunroof into a wheel well. I had taken the ring off so I could fit my hand into a very tight space. Well, hell, I then realized that for whatever reason there was for this flow, it was a good thing. I asked a friend, "What song would you like to hear next on the radio?" His reply, "Rush," as there was dead air coming from the radio between the song that had just ended and the one which was about to play. Rush's song, "New World Man," began to play. He knew me and this did not surprise him. Thanks was all he had to say. For some unknown reason, I was trying to remember the name of the movie, in which the actor from the movie, The Karate Kid, had a guitar duel with the devil for a soul. At that moment I sat in the car I was working on only to hear the song, "Crossroads," by Cream, start to play. An instant answer to my question, "Crossroads." A roommate had asked me if I could set his radio alarm clock, which seemed to be above his technical ability. As I set it to the correct time and switched the alarm button on, the radio came to life with the words, "Wake me on the inside," came blaring out of it. We both laughed, but I knew this was just an example of divine timing. While pouring glue into a tube, I heard Phil Collins sing, "There's a hole in there somewhere," so I turned the tube around. Sure enough, there was glue leaking out of the hole. With my every action and thought being replayed in music and the words of others, be they live or through transmitted frequencies, you might understand why and how I might believe I was being watched and monitored by DJs, even so far as believing perhaps they had a secured website with which to view my actions. Knowing that this was truly a delusion, if only for the reason my thoughts could not produce actions in others to react fast enough to answer a question or thought I had on my mind. such as wondering about the title to said movie, Crossroads. One day as I was zipping around the stations, simply to use the words I was hearing, to make synaptic connection and create thoughts that might have never occurred to me otherwise. I hit the AM frequency band without warning, and I heard one gentleman say to the other, with panic in his voice, "He's at it again, just zipping around the frequencies." What? We were told that he wouldn't be monitoring these frequencies. What should we do now? It's too late. He's heard us talking about him. And then completely dead air. Years later, I had heard about The Truman Show, but had not seen it till several years after it was released. When I did get a chance to see it, my only interest in seeing it was purely to check out the technology to do such a thing. As in the movie, The Truman Show, I had such a moment of perception, which altered all reality. Such as the moment Truman heard, due to a frequency anomaly, on his radio that he had just almost had an accident and run over a woman. When I saw this scene, it was as though Jim Carrey was doing an impression of me, as I had reacted during my cross-frequency event. Events also took place other than those of a hearing reflection of previous events, which certainly were of a physical nature, where the physical matter around me seemed to be controlled by my thoughts. Across the shop I heard this awful racket. I turned to hear Tony's personal cooling fan. The fan blade was hitting the safety cage it was confined in. He walked over and adjusted it, so it would stop making the racket. He looked at me and shook his head, then stood there looking at it, to see if it would remain quiet. Several moments later I yelled, "Hey Tony," and pointed to the fan as though I would make it start screaming again, and it did. Twice more that day I got out of the car I was working on, to repeat this feat, with exactly the same results. This was one of those cases, I believe God smacked me for. I thought I was causing it to happen, not realizing God had simply placed me in the right spot at the right moment. Oh yes, the power of the finger. One stormy night while on the balcony I shot out my finger in a gun-type fashion at the ground below. I wish I could have had it on film, because a lightning bolt struck at that precise moment and spot. All I could do is turn away and crack up laughing. Send a bolt of lightning, very, very frightening. This last incident led to a reality much deeper beyond the doorway, a reality where the physical world seemed to be controlled by my will. This of course was not the case, but appeared to be. An example of this included my ability, as I would notice several leaves blowing down the street, and at the moment I would focus on one specific leaf it would stop dead in its tracks as if nailed to the ground instantly. This was not a sometime occurrence, it happened countless times, time after time. Let me tell you, just when you think you're hot shit, God will send a whole stampede of leaves, and they all will ignore your gaze. Now knowing that my will was not the force which actually was causing this effect, I developed a relationship with the wind. It became a friend. Several and more detailed occurrences happened while having the wind as a friend. The most intense event was as I stepped off a bus. A rush of leaves approached me and stopped a couple of feet in front of me. Without thinking or realizing how bizarre my thoughts were, I had the sense of greeting a friend. About a foot away from my left foot stopped a small branch, with about a dozen leaves on it. I thought of it as making a goal between my feet. I thought, wide left, since it was closest to my left foot. Instantaneous of this thought, the branch was blown outside of my right foot. I considered that it did in fact travel the longer distance to miss the goal between my feet. It did in fact miss wide left, from the leaves' point of view and not mine. My reality at this time was that the wind was a multi-dimensional force, with the ability to sense an individual's intent, what you're thinking, and it can demonstrate its willingness to show you his presence. While walking down the street a few blocks from my home, my attention was drawn to a fast-spinning 18-inch rainbow-colored pinwheel on a lawn. I turned 90 degrees to my right and stared at it and thought, it would be nice if it stopped, and at that instant it did. A few moments after it stopped I thought, reversed direction, and instantly it did. Believe me, it did. Now an example of phasing evolving into tranactual. Without a doubt, the most detailed and intricate event occurred while finding myself at what I thought was the end of incredible journey into the zone this tour had led to. Incarceration once again. But in this instance, it did not end with the reality that I had gone a little too far and lost touch with the real world. Unexpectedly, being jailed did not mean an exit through the doorway. Realizing that God had placed me in this circumstance for a reason, if only to put it in my book. I continue. Reading was a great way to pass the time. As I read aloud a particularly interesting sentence in the book I was reading, my bunkmate exclaimed that it was a fitting reply to what he had just read. Without hesitation or a plan, we went to the common area outside of our cell and proceeded to grab a handful of books each and sit at one of the steel tables. Each taking turns, we would place a finger within the pages and read aloud what it said. Consistently, time after time, what we were reading to each other sounded as if we were having a conversation. Sometimes it was a question, with an appropriate answer, others were the continuation of a thought. We did this for several minutes, both of us completely amazed at how incredibly intricate and detailed one another's replies had become. Then I read the words, God sent us a cuckoo as a sign of his sanctioning our actions. At that very moment, on the television a cartoon cuckoo popped out of its clock and announced to us it was there. We both cracked up laughing, uncontrollably. As I was trying to catch my breath, I had to know what book this sentence came from. The book was about a pair of missionaries traveling down the Amazon. As I wanted to read further as to the circumstances for such a statement, a guard, who was standing in our cell, called to me. He wanted me over to explain what my friend and I were laughing about. I walked over to him, with a book in my hand, and proceeded to explain just what we had been doing, and when I read the statement again, the cuckoo, once again, was right on cue. As he was laughing, I decided to see if he too could have followed us through the doorway. I asked him to pick up any 2 books of about 30 which were in a row placed on the floor, against the wall. Having chosen 2 books, I told him to place a finger within the pages of the first book and read it. As he fanned the page and pointed to words, I said, "Look and see what they say." To our amazement, he read, "Look and see." Now, being totally confident that a second demonstration couldn't fail, I told him to do it again, with the second book. The words he was now pointing at read, "Open your eyes and see." All he could say was, "You've certainly opened my eyes." He then asked me who I was, and what was I doing there. I told him of the circumstances which landed me there and told him of and my universal language. His reply was completely unexpected, as he told me that his father had taught him my universal language when he was a kid. Not that he remembered it, but his father had in fact spent time talking about exactly the same code. He then said he had to leave and do his job elsewhere. This started me thinking about just how many people I had told my story to. What were the chances that I had actually met his father in the couple of dozen years I had been on this path? It seemed, in my world, the odds were greatly in my favor. This one event truly strengthened my resolve to continue on the path God had chosen for me, regardless of any consequences my actions in the real world might have for me. Later that afternoon, I walked over to the door which faced the observation booth and banged on it to get the guard's attention. Without hesitation, this same guard pulled the microphone to his mouth and said, "Yes, Messiah?" There was no sarcasm in his voice, and this only seemed to anger me. I yelled back, "Don't call me that. This reminds me of the time I asked "Mom, is the word awash, or can it be used as awashed?" She said she wasn't sure if it could be used as awashed. The reason I asked was because I wanted to use the word in writing my first book in 1997. Using it to say Phil Collins had been awashed with a blinding light. Well, moments after I asked the question, she called to me and said that she was doing a crossword puzzle and that the next word across was awash.
As it states in 2 Corinthians, chapter 12, verse 6, "Even if I should choose to boast, I would not be a fool, because I would be speaking the truth. But I refrain, so no one will think more of me than is warranted by what I do or say." In short, simple words, I know how magical and wonderful this little world God created is, and I will only speak the truth. This is the God's honest truth of what has taken place in my life, in the real world. Entering in the past has been as simple as requesting to do so. One example of this world's reality was, I placed my hands on the shower wall in front of me, palms flat and fingers spread wide as if to place them on a hand scanner for clearance to enter a secured facility, and asked God for another chance to enter. After drying myself off, I went to the kitchen counter to turn my small boom box around. Since it had been facing towards the dining room, I wanted to hear it better in the bedroom. I hit the power button, only to hear the words, "Turn the beat around." Having realized how easy it was to step through that doorway really did surprise me. I wanted to confirm if this was true or not. After dressing, I placed the radio on the kitchen table and changed the station. The DJ said, "That was 9 Inch Nails." I cut the cards that were on the table in front of me, damn well knowing that it would be a 9, and it was. I hit a preset button to hear the words T for 2. Cutting the cards again and knowing it would be a 2, and it was. Also having 4 dice from a backgammon set within reach, I rolled them, and 3 times the same 4 numbers came up. So I rolled them a 4th time and the same 4 numbers appeared. I then thought, don't roll them again, you're pushing your luck, but without hesitation, I rolled them a 5th time and they did in fact land on the same 4 numbers. Passage granted and confirmed. While walking across the shop, headed back to a car, with a drain tube in my hand, I snapped it like a whip. Changing the station, I heard bull whips cracking from the song Southern Man. One particular gentleman threatened me with bodily harm if I didn't stop what I was doing. I mentioned the song and it came on the radio. So he turned off the radio and turned on the television. So I went out for some cigarettes. When I got back, I then told him I had seen a pizza box lying upside down in the road and a dog sniffing around the box. So I kicked the box over so the dog might have a chance to lick what might be inside. Well, much to both of our surprise, there was an entire pizza in the box, so the dog went to town. I could see by my friend's reaction that it was not what I had expected to this cute little story. He replied, "I told you to stop it." He was now pointing to the television and the pizza commercial, in which the dog is attacking the pizza delivery man. I could tell that the best thing for me to do is sit and not say or do anything until we slipped out of the flow. At home, using an extension cord for my headphones so I could listen on the balcony, as I was exiting through the sliding glass door, at the same moment a short and whirring occurred. Phil was singing, "I see your lifeline is breaking." At work, while unwrapping a single-edge razor blade, it dropped out of my hand and fell to the floor. The strange thing was, I didn't hear it hit. Without moving my feet, I looked down to see where it had landed. I couldn't see it as I looked straight down and all around my feet. It was nowhere to be seen. Taking a step back, it came into view. Unbelievably, it was standing on end. That's right, standing on razor's edge. I realized while I was looking straight down at it, looking for a rectangular shiny object, I did not see it, because I had been viewing it as a thin straight line. I called 2 others over to look at what had just happened. They knew that I was not making this story up and they looked in amazement. Logic told me that it had fallen directly perpendicular to the floor, with just enough speed and momentum to tack into the deck paint which covered the floor. The deck paint was quite dry, since it had been painted when we first moved into the shop, 2 years earlier.